Good evening and welcome to Hardfire. I'm your host, Joseph Dobrian, here with you for another half hour of news and current events from a libertarian perspective. My guests tonight are Christopher Cantwell, who is a candidate for the United States House of Representatives from New York's 1st District, which covers much of Long Island. Mr. Cantwell is seeking the nomination of the Libertarian, Republican, Conservative, and Independence parties. And next to him is his campaign manager, Gary Donoyan, who is also the vice chairman of the Nassau County Libertarian Party. Now, Mr. Cantwell, I'll just start with an easy one. Why are you running and what do you stand for?
I am sick of yelling at my television, Joseph.
You're sick of yelling at your television?
Yes, I am sick of yelling at my television. I'll tell you what, I've been paying attention to politics really only since September 11th, 2001. I turned on my television that day and it was changed. You know, I never really paid a whole lot of attention to it before that, and I started paying attention and cheered on the Bush administration for the first term, voted for him in 2004, and then I thought things started going a little haywire.
Okay,
you know?
And now you're running for U.S. House of Representatives, I suppose, because you want to change things. What are some of the changes you would like to make if you were elected?
Well, I definitely want to see us get back to sound money. Monetary reform is a big issue on my plate. I think the Federal Reserve is a big problem. And additionally, I think the 16th and 17th Amendments need to go.
Okay, now I know what you're talking about. Probably some of our viewers do too, but some of them don't. So let's take them one by one and you can explain in the simplest possible terms what you're talking about. First of all, what is the Federal Reserve? What does it do? And what's wrong with it, in your opinion?
Okay. First, what is the Federal Reserve not? Well, it is not federal. It is as Federal Express, as a lot of people like to say. It's licensed by the federal government.
Now, the Federal Reserve is a bank, is it not?
Yes, it's a private bank licensed by the federal government to print money and loan it into existence at interest. Okay. Now, if we take that statement alone, if all dollars are loaned into existence at interest, how long does it take to pay back the debt? The debt can never be paid back. It just gets bigger and bigger over time. There's a little bit of they call it systemic risk. I call it imminent failure.
Now, the Federal Reserve, or the Fed as it's called informally, actually controls the amount of money that is in circulation, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So the Fed could, in theory, print $1 million and say that that is the total amount of cash available in the United States, or they could produce $1 quadrillion and say that is the total amount of money available in the United States, correct? They can
yes, they control how much money there is, and through inflation and deflation, you know, a lot of crazy things happen.
Okay, now explain to a dumb guy like me how that is dangerous.
Well, when you inflate the currency, then the currency is worth less, and if you inflate the currency too much, then the currency is worthless. You know, and then if you deflate, well, then there's not enough dollars going around for all of us to have what we need.
Okay. Now, a lot of people who think the way you think believe that we ought to return to the gold standard. Do you agree with that? And what is the gold standard and why should we return to it?
Well, the gold standard keeps a little bit of a check on how much currency is going around because there's a finite amount of gold. If people can go and cash in their dollars for gold at any time, then obviously you can have a problem if you inflate the currency too much, if you debase the currency.
In other words, you're saying if we're on the gold standard, then we can say, look, 1 ounce of gold is worth 100 American dollars, period. And every United States dollar has got to be backed by the supply of gold currently extant in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes. Prior to FDR, I mean, all dollars were backed by a known weight of silver or gold. And that's currently not the case, which is why they say the price of gold is going up. Well, the price of gold has never gone up. The price of the dollar goes down.
That's right. That's right. So instead of gold becoming more valuable, you're simply debasing the currency.
Yeah, the dollar goes down, gold doesn't go up. That's not how it works.
Okay. So in other words, it's like in the old days when we used gold coins. If you had a gold coin that was worth $10, say, then an unscrupulous person might clip a little bit off the edge of it or shave just a little bit off the edge of it and put that aside, put that in his sock drawer.
Right. Now,
he could still pass that $10 coin off for $10, but he would have debased it a little bit. It would be worth a little bit less. So the next person who gets hold of that coin, he's going to pass it off to somebody else, like a ripped dollar bill, and he's going to keep the good coins for himself, keeping them out of circulation.
Right, but as soon as somebody puts it on a scale, then they know that there's a problem. And that's exactly what's happening to the dollar right now. When you compare the dollar to gold or anything like that, gasoline for that matter is probably something that most people could relate to. I mean, everything in your world is becoming more expensive. It's not that these items are becoming more expensive, it's that the dollar is becoming less valuable.
Okay. Well, realistically, how likely is it that we would return to the gold standard, and how would you go about causing that to happen?
Well, I think it's inevitable that we do. The question is, how much is it going to hurt? It's if we talk about money being the blood of the economy, then the Federal Reserve and the U.S. dollar are the heart. So you do have to be very careful about how you go about doing it. You're basically doing a heart transplant of the economy. I know Ron Paul has a bill before the House of Representatives to abolish the Federal Reserve, or at least it's also been suggested to possibly put it under the Treasury Department. Could also be a possibility on that. Repealing legal tender laws and allowing private currencies to compete with the Federal Reserve. All of these things are potential options to get us in that direction.
Now, that used to be done all the time, didn't it? The use of private currencies.
Right, exactly. The Liberty Dollar, e-gold, e-bullion, there were a number of different things, but basically the United States federal government went in and caused these folks a lot of trouble. And I believe the Liberty Dollar, there's a lawsuit ongoing because they didn't think they were breaking any laws, but apparently somebody wanted to stop them from doing what they were doing. And
there were private banks at one time that could issue their own paper currency, and
yeah.
I remember back in Victorian times, there was a fellow who lived in San Francisco, a rather crazy man, called himself Emperor Norton, called himself the Emperor of the United States of America. But he did have some money, and he was able to issue paper money in small amounts that would be honored just like any other currency. People used it as legal tender.
Yeah.
And they thought Emperor Norton was kind of a funny guy, but his money was good.
Yeah. I mean, American citizens write checks every day.
Yeah.
And it's not currency per se, but you're writing something down on a piece of paper and saying, I promise to pay you, and handing it off. I mean, it's how much different would it be to have a secure currency? The Liberty Dollar, for example, if you know about it. I mean, when that was printed out, I mean, that piece of paper was more secure than a Federal Reserve note, as far as the encoding of it, as far as trying to counterfeit it.
But I understand that while some merchants will accept the Liberty Dollar, they generally will take it as a discount, correct? They will insist that you give them, say, 6 Liberty Dollars for something that costs 5 greenbacks.
Yeah, depending on who you're going to. And I mean, the Liberty Dollar is negotiable. I mean, it's just like trying to buy something with silver or gold,
Okay, very good. Now, Ron Paul is in favor of, that's for those of you who don't know, Ron Paul is a congressman from Texas who ran for president on the Republican nomination for president in 2008, although he's more of a libertarian than a Republican. Ron Paul is in favor of ending the Federal Reserve. Now, do you think that is feasible, and how likely is it to happen?
Well, let's face it, the Federal Reserve is a powerful force. So it's going to be difficult, but at the end of the day, if you get more people in the House of Representatives and the Senate who want to abolish the Federal Reserve, then the Federal Reserve gets abolished.
Right. Is it likely that we will elect a good many people who want to get rid of the Fed? In the meantime, if we can't get rid of the Fed, what can we do to make its behavior less pernicious?
Well, as far as getting people elected that will want to get rid of the Fed, that's going to be, I don't necessarily think that might happen in 2010, but I think it's inevitable that it happens because most people didn't know what the Federal Reserve was up until pretty recently. Once we started with the bailouts and everything else, people started saying, how many dollars are there exactly? And when you start going down that rabbit hole, then you find out all about the Federal Reserve. And people are starting to look at it, which is why, on to the transparency part, we have H.R. 1207 before the House right now, which has, I think it's up over 300 co-sponsors now, to audit the Federal Reserve and remove a lot of the auditing restrictions, which is absolutely necessary as far as I'm concerned, because they're doing a lot of stuff we don't know what they're doing.
Are you telling me that the Fed has never been audited?
Not in a complete and accurate manner. The argument could be made that we know more about the CIA than we do about the Federal Reserve. And the CIA, their primary responsibilities are killing, stealing, and spying.
Right. Now that strikes me as rather amazing because we demand so much transparency in most financial dealings these days. For example, if you are buying a house, then you want to do due diligence on the house. You want to look over that house very carefully. You want to do a title search to make sure that the current owners actually own it, that there are no governmental liens on it, that it doesn't have termites, all kinds of stuff that you do before you actually buy that house. And that's called transparency. But the Federal Reserve apparently is immune to any kind of investigation. People can't investigate it.
It's almost supernatural. I mean, it's above the law practically. There's not a whole lot of oversight to it, and we don't know what it's doing. And it's doing probably the most important thing you can do in a country. Rothschild said, "Allow me to control a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws."
That's right.
And this is what the Federal Reserve is doing under way too much secrecy.
Okay, and I think it's interesting to point out that the Federal Reserve was created by a so-called liberal, a so-called progressive, Woodrow Wilson,
Yes.
Who has for some reason gone down in history as one of our greatest presidents. I personally consider him possibly the very worst of our presidents.
I completely agree with you there. Him and FDR are up there. Under Wilson, we passed the Federal Reserve Act, and then we passed the 16th and 17th Amendments, which I also brought up. Those three things combined really steered this country in a very different direction.
Okay. Now, the 16th and 17th Amendments, I know what they are, but some of our viewers may not. Explain what they
The
are.
16th Amendment says that the United States may tax incomes from any source derived, and the 17th Amendment makes senators elected by popular election. Now, to the 17th Amendment, we're also used to voting for senators, but prior to that, the state legislatures elected the senators from their states, and basically the House of Representatives represented the people, and they were elected by popular vote within their election districts, and the senators were elected by the state legislatures. Now that matters because the House of Representatives represents us, we the people. The Senate is supposed to represent the state governments. Right now you have a situation in America where neither House of Congress cares about states' rights. And that's the 10th Amendment says that those powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively. In other words, it puts the cap on federal power. Nobody in Congress cares about the states' rights because they just want to get elected by popular vote.
That's true. Now, I think it's interesting to point out that while the 16th and 17th Amendments, I believe, became effective under the Wilson administration, they were actually passed while the Taft administration was in power, Taft being a moderate to conservative Republican. So it seems that both of those amendments, the 16th and 17th, had bipartisan support from Democrats and Republicans alike, which just goes to show you that bipartisanship is when the stupid party and the evil party get together and do something really stupid and evil.
I've said a number of times, bipartisanship is my worst nightmare, Joe. That's when the worst things happen,
Right. Well, and just about as bad is the concept of democracy, which is why we have a popularly elected Senate, correct? Because there was this fad for democracy, for direct government, for direct vote of the people on as many issues as possible.
Right.
And so people started insisting that United States senators be popularly elected rather than elected by the state legislature.
Right. It was meant to, and it sounds good on its face to bring the government closer to the people. I want the government very far away from me, which might seem odd now that I'm running for Congress. But in general, I don't want the government involved in my life. I'll vote and stuff like that, but I don't think it's good to bring the government too close to the people,
true.
Especially the federal government. It's too big, too powerful.
Exactly. The more democratic a government is, the more run by the people it is, the more it gets in your face, the more it gets into your pocket, and the more it controls you and turns you into its slave.
Yeah, in a democracy, Joe, 51% can vote to destroy 49%. In a republic, there are rules the government has to follow. Congress needs to get back in their box and off our backs.
Exactly so. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for breakfast.
Right.
But how do we restore the idea of a republic where a government has limitations, because people in government themselves are not going to accept limitations. They want to be as powerful as possible, correct?
Well, and besides that, I mean, it's just the fact that the public doesn't know a lot of this stuff or care for that matter. I'm finding this out even on the campaign trail as I talk to people, and I'm saying, you know, they're saying, well, what can you do for me? And I'm like, well, you know, I have 18 intended powers here listed in Article 1, Section 8. Which one of them would you like me to exercise? You know, if there's an unconstitutional law that's bothering you, I'd love to get rid of it. But Congress is not supposed to have a lot of power, but for them to get elected, they got to give the people what the people
Yeah, I
ask
found
for.
that to
It's
be
a problem.
frustrating also when I was running for mayor of New York this past fall. People always were asking me, what are you going to do for me? It's a matter, apparently in their minds, of the government being Santa Claus. And what toys are you going to bring me if I vote for you?
Yeah, exactly.
What's my payoff if I vote for you? And my answer always was, I will do nothing to you.
Right. I will apply less force to you. That's what I say, yeah.
Okay. And that did not work very well with me. But is it working better with you these days?
When you find people who are informed, it works out pretty well. But then they say, well, what are you going to do for everybody else? Because you need to get elected, you got to be Santa. You know, I'm running against Tim Bishop. Tim Bishop is voting to give everybody health care. Free doctors for everybody. I mean, who can argue with that until you actually bother to think it through?
Okay. And when you're running for the Republican nomination, you are running against, your main opposition is a chap named Randy Altshuler, correct?
Yes.
And where do you differ from Mr. Altshuler on some of the major issues?
Well, I'll tell you what, I haven't gotten a whole lot of issues out of Mr. Altshuler. I did meet him once, and I know that he doesn't want to pull out of the UN, which is something that I think is a big deal. I don't think we should be in there at all. You know, did not want to return to a gold standard, didn't seem to understand the nature of the Federal Reserve and acted like a couple of questions that I gave him about the Constitution were gotcha questions, as he put it. And he said we live in a democracy, not a republic. So I at that point, I took it upon myself. I said, somebody's got to fix this thing. I can't. I thought that when we went from the Bush administration going nuts to the Obama administration going nuts, that people would wake up and start seeing, hey, let me pick up my Constitution. Let me start figuring out how to right this ship. But it's not the same. We're just going back in the other direction. They're like, hey, this socialism stuff stinks. We better go back to warmongering and social intolerance. I don't know what.
Well, the sad fact is that most people don't know thing one about the United States Constitution.
Right.
They know the First Amendment, freedom of speech, but to a lot of people, freedom of speech means freedom to say what I agree with.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have free speech, but when you go saying this, that, and the other, then there's got to be some limits. That's the argument.
Well, you know what it is? There's people always talk about, freedom of speech is limited. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, they say. Well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire, okay? If there's a fire and you yell fire, you could have saved a lot of people,
Right, and it's the consequences that are punished. There is no such thing as prior restraint, but if you yell fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire and you cause a riot and you cause damage, then you can be punished for the damage.
Yes. Every right comes with a responsibility.
Right. And I would argue also that a right that comes at the expense of other people is not a right at all.
There's no such thing as a right to someone else's property.
Exactly. And under a democracy, which we don't legally have, but which has become corrupted into a democracy.
Right, behaving as one.
Yeah,
yes.
We're a republic that has been corrupted into a democracy.
Yeah.
And under a democracy, you are living under the greatest possible form of tyranny in which you have no rights whatsoever. Because,
mob rule.
Right, you have privileges that can be taken from you by legislation or by referendum or whatever you like.
Yeah. And I just like to put that in the right terms. You have those rights. Those rights, you always have them. Your rights are inherent within your humanity, rights derived from property. If you have the property, you have the right to exercise complete control over it so long as you don't violate the rights of another. The problem is that your rights are violated. And that's what I think. I want to have a real discussion in this country about the rights of man. Because I don't think that anybody's paying any particular attention to a particular set of property assignment rules or what people's rights are. Let's have a conversation about it.
People differ a great deal about what people's rights are.
Yeah.
You are saying that rights derive from property.
Yeah.
There are a great many people who would disagree with you, and they would say that you have a right to basic health care, you have a right to basic education, you have a right to a job. Do you agree with any of that? And if not, why not?
No, I don't, because you cannot have a right to someone else's property, and I wouldn't pretend like that type of property assignment rules puts us in a perfect world. But it creates the most conflict-free use of scarce resources, which is what any society really should be. Okay, I work for my wages, I earn my wages, I go out and I work nature into useful things, and that is how I obtain property, and my rights derive from that property. I have the right to my life, I have the right to my liberty, and I have the right to my property, and that's where all your rights derive from.
Okay, and it would seem to me that the 16th Amendment, the income tax, actually flies in the face of that and says we can take some of your property, as much of it pretty much as we think is proper to take.
Well, you know, taxes are unfortunately a necessary evil at some level. So, I mean, the 16th Amendment, we repeal the 16th Amendment, your taxes don't end. They don't even necessarily go down. Your taxes could theoretically go up because the federal government is still going to pass that bill on to the state government, and the state government will then pass that bill on to you in one way or another, or they'll drill for oil or gas.
Okay.
You know, but at the end of the day, you're going to get taxed. The reason I talk about repealing the 16th and 17th Amendments is not so much to stop the taxation, but to change the form of government. And I think that'll cause your taxes to go down, because once the states are writing those checks out of their own accounts, they are going to want to elect more fiscally conservative senators to the Senate and keep that money in their states.
Well, now let's break away from you for just a moment and let Mr. Donoyan into the conversation. Mr. Donoyan, for now at any rate, you are Mr. Cantwell's campaign manager.
That's right.
You'll be deciding whom he talks to and when and where he goes. What do you feel are going to be the hot button issues in this coming campaign? What are the issues that you are going to urge Mr. Cantwell to focus on in order to get his message out there and propel him into the House of Representatives?
Well, as far as the issues, I'm very happy with the way Chris has kind of categorized them and addressed them, and I think I can leave which issues inspire him to him. I mean, I think the Federal Reserve is a very hot button topic right now, and I think he addresses it very well. It's something very important to me personally too. I like his views on the war. I think that differentiates him from both of the major parties at this point, and I think more and more as the weeks go on, as we see what's happening now in Afghanistan, that's good. It seems to me that will be a big source of support for him.
Okay, and you are also vice chair of the Nassau County Libertarian Party, and there has always been an argument amongst libertarians as to what is the best way to get our message out. Some people say that it's good to run candidates who have a clear libertarian message, because even if they don't get elected, they will get the message out. Others say, no, it's better to either not run candidates at all or run mainstream Republicans or Democrats who have slight libertarian leanings. Where do you fall on this spectrum?
Well, I think in New York we have a particular problem because there's a great temptation written into the laws of the state, which I don't think any other state really has, and that is it's twofold. One is the ability to cross-endorse. So we are tempted then to nominate a currently running candidate from a major party, in particular the Republicans. There are many who would prefer that we simply work within the Republican Party, or at worst run candidates that are also Republicans. Secondly, in order to get major party status in New York, we're required to have a governor candidate that reaches 50,000 votes, and the temptation then is to cross-endorse in that race in particular for that reason. And that kind of conflict, I think, within the Libertarian Party has caused a lot of dissension, which really is artificial. I think it's imposed by the state laws of New York.
Okay, and I would like to go back to you for just a moment, Mr. Cantwell, and bring up an issue that we haven't touched on yet, which Mr. Donoyan just did, which is the conduct of the war. How would you conduct the war if you were president? You're running for House of Representatives, not president, but obviously you have some views on how it should be conducted, and you would reflect those views during your service in the House of Representatives, correct?
Yes, I'd like to get us out without any undue delay. I mean, we'd obviously have to exit in a safe manner. We can't just start running, obviously, but we we have to be more concerned about our guys than their guys at the end of the day. The liberty and lives of the Afghan and Iraqi people are their responsibilities. Our lives and our freedoms are our responsibilities, and not just from those two places, but we've got 700-something military bases in 130 different countries, yet we don't secure our own borders. It's foolish, bring these guys home.
Okay, well, this seems self-evident to me, but so many people would disagree with you. Why is that, do you suppose?
I think that a lot of people feel, rightly so to an extent, that America is a positive influence in the world. And I mean, we have caused a lot of good things, no doubt, with our interfering in foreign affairs, but I just don't think it's worth it, the cost of blood and treasure and ill will that we create across the world to keep on trying to exert our military influence that way.
I would agree with you, and in any case, we are no longer really trying to spread any type of principled government anywhere. We talk vaguely about spreading democracy, but we all know how well democracy works,
right.
And many of us sensible people find it detestable.
Right.
Meanwhile, America is not really performing according to what we consider basic American principles. Instead, we have a man in the White House right now who is trying to turn us into Norway.
Right. It's absurd, to talk about we're going to go spread our principles to other places, and we're not adhering to any set of principles. And that's the Libertarian Party, party over principle over politics, and that's, as Gary brought up, the cross endorsement thing is probably why the Libertarian Party doesn't have permanent ballot access in New York State, is because we won't compromise those principles. We don't parasite off the other parties.
That is something that I think voters really need to know about the Libertarians, is that we are the party of principle. We do not shift our position on the issues for the sake of expediency. We don't shift our positions just to stay in power. We are the party of principle. We say that above all, we stand for the principle of self-ownership, correct?
That's right, exactly. Principles over politics, and I'm seeing that now. I mean, like I said, on the campaign trail, it's people try to sway in other directions, and they say, well, you're not in line with my conservative values, or you're not in line with my liberal values.
Yeah.
And I say, I have principles,
That's
and
it.
if you understand
And
those
our
principles, then
our principle,
you
the
follow
bottom
them
line,
through.
is self-ownership. And on that note, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Mr. Cantwell. Thank you, Mr. Donoyan.
Thank you.
Good luck in the upcoming campaign. This is Joseph Dobrian. Good night from Hardfire.